Welcome to the Action for Access podcast. Action for Access is a project that is supported by ARISA. ARISA stands for Advancing Rights in Southern Africa. The project is implemented by the Namibia Media Trust in partnership with the National Federation of People with Disabilities in Namibia. This is going to be a series of podcasts. Some of the topics that will be discussed during the interviews will be access to information, whether it's in the media space or any other public setting, access to education or inclusive education to be exact, and also gender participation and representation of people with disabilities in different entities that influence policy making. Welcome to the first session of the Action for Access podcast. My name is Orben Muluti, and I will be moderating this session today. I'm joined here in the studio by two gentlemen. I would like first to introduce them before I introduce the topic at hand. First, we have Mr. Paheja Siririka, who is a radio presenter and as well a journalist with the New Era newspaper. I have that right?
Yes, you have that right.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
We are happy to have you in the studio.
It's a pleasure being here.
Also with me, I have Mr. Tove Kangotue. Mr. Tove Kangotue he's an actor, he's a model, PR personality, and basically a socialpreneur.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word. So a socialpreneur. Thank you very much for being with us in the studio, Mr. Tove.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. So the discussion at hand, we want to discuss action for access, right? This is access mainly to information. So we want to know in terms of, from your perspectives as people in your respective professions, we want to know how inclusive is the information currently for everybody, including people with disabilities. So I'll get into the first question. So do you believe, and I want you to start with you, Mr. Paheja. Do you believe that media platforms are accessible to persons with disabilities at the moment?
Wow, it's a very interesting question because it has two sides to it. But one thing that I can sum it up with is that yes, media platforms are easily accessible to persons with disability, but not all. And the reason why I'm saying, or why I said it's almost like a two-folded type of question, is because we have been slacking as media in terms of being very inclusive on our platforms when it comes to the dissemination of information. Obviously, a person who is visually impaired stands a very lesser chance of having access to information from our side as a print organization, for an example. So that's a disadvantage when it comes to that. A person who is hearing impaired, and hopefully they do have the ability to read, they can comprehend content that is published in newspapers, they do stand a better chance. I love the fact that we are inclusive in terms of the vernac in the language in the country. We do publish certain content in Silozi, Rukwangali, Kwekwekovapo, Shiherero, and Shindonga or Shikwanyama. So to a certain extent, we have created platforms that enables persons with disability to have access to information.
All right. No, thank you very much. I actually have a follow-up question for that. But for now, let me ask Mr. Tove the same question. What is your perspective? What do you think? Do the media platforms that we have today, are they accessible for everybody, including people with disabilities?
I would say exactly the same same view as Mr. Paheja there. That
two-folded?
Basically that it's both. It is accessible for some people with some disabilities, depending on your disability that we're talking about here. For example, like I think a good example would be television. we all know that our news is very important because that's how you get current affairs and get to know what's going on each and every day. And I do know that we have sign language interpreters for our news programs. Yes, this is not accessible like for every show. There's not a thing that's like on every show on our channels. So that is something maybe that we can improve on. But with regards to news, as I said, that's where you get your information, most of your important information, and I think that in that sense it's covered. But for example, if you have a hearing disability and you can't listen to radio, so that becomes a challenge. How do we sort that out as media? How do we come to a point where we can give or disseminate information to people with disabilities? So.
All right. I love your answers. Just the fact that you acknowledge that in terms of accessibility, there is still sort of a lack, and this will now lead to my follow-up question on this one. Mr. Paheja, as somebody that works in print media, this we know is one of the oldest forms of sort of information dissemination. Newspapers have come a long way. Now, how come we have not? What do you think? Obviously, from your own perspective, why do you think we have not yet realized the need to be inclusive, or why did we not realize that there is a gap in terms of, for example, somebody with low vision, like myself, because as a person with albinism, my sight is low, right? So sometimes print media is not accessible to me. So why do you think, although this media platform has been around for ages, what do you think until now we have not found a way to sort of make it inclusive? Maybe make a number of large print copies, or maybe release a sort of summarized version in maybe Braille every month or something. Where do you think that is?
The most important step to take for media houses, and I'm not only talking about Namibia, but I think globally, is for us to do, although the information or the available issue is very clear, there are certain problems or issues that persons with disabilities face regarding the access of information. We still need to do an assessment. And an assessment, I mean, we need to go on the ground and find out how these people are accessing information, or how our brothers and sisters are accessing information. And considering the fact that issues such as, this is actually the first time I'm hearing of it, that, I am aware of the, how can I say it, the lack of sight that persons with albinism have. But the issue of enlarging the font, it's an idea that could really be incorporated, especially in the paper. But these things are not happening because I feel newspapers or media houses are not aware of this. So that's why assessments need to be done. Now, for an assessment to be done, it means we need to go on the ground, have conversations with persons with disability, and find out how else can we make sure that they get access to this information. We cannot obviously tailor information specifically to persons with disability. The information is very cross-cutting, is across the board, and the information that the story that I'm doing is very important to everyone. But we need to find out the person who cannot, who is visually impaired, for an example. How else can we tailor this information so that they can still have access to it? It's all about assessing. It's all about getting to the ground. And I think the reason why media houses are not doing this is because they are not aware of it.
All right.
Which is very debatable, but yeah.
Yeah. And basically, because you also touched a little bit on my next question, you answered a little bit of it. Again, I want both of you to answer these questions, especially Mr. Tove, from a perspective as a person with a disability. So what efforts can be taken by individuals, media organizations, agencies responsible for public information dissemination to ensure that they are not excluding anyone from the information that they are sharing? Basically, you also just now said that one of the ways is for them to take the initiative upon themselves. You spoke particularly about media outlets or media houses. They should approach people with disability understand what their needs are, and then sort of try to tailor a dissemination method or mechanism that will be accessible towards them. So what other measures do you think can be taken as an individual, even from your perspective, Mr. Paheja first, Paheja, as a journalist? What are you doing individually to make sure that you, when you are reporting, not only is your information accessible, but also in the sense that it does not sort of infringe on the rights of a person with disabilities? That terminology is very important on a
Yes.
sensitive situation or matter or topic such as disability.
Yeah.
So we would want to ensure that instead of using words like dwarf, and then we get the politically correct word, which is maybe short-statured person. So individually, how do you think we can approach an inclusive reporting mechanism or manner, and also without infringing on the rights of somebody else?
Yeah. No, it starts at home. It starts at home. We need to be more inclusive, because I feel it is somewhat of a double standard for you to, to cater to a certain group than doing it across the board. Media engagement is one of the very important ways of improving the media landscape in terms of disseminating information. Institutions like the Disability Council should engage more with the media, because those are institutions, those are the gatekeepers of our brothers and sisters. Those are the institutions which know the struggle that persons with disabilities are facing, so that we can be well informed of the struggles that they are facing. And institutions should also have very conducive environments for persons with disability. I'm yet to really, come across an institution, find the ramp walks are there, where a person's wheelchair can be, can be pushed and whatnot. But what happens to those institutions which have stairs and not elevators?
Yeah.
The person needs to go up there and conduct an interview with a journalist like any normal person should. But these facilities are not available. So, and I think it really has to be a one-on-one session. What exactly is it that, our brothers and sisters are going through? How do you address these issues? We need to ask, to hold ourselves as the media accountable. The messages that we are sending across to Namibia, is it reaching everyone? Which part of, the country is this message, or are these messages not reaching? So these are the only ways that we can really be more inclusive. And I don't like the use of the word inclusive while we are not inclusive, because in many cases we are not inclusive. It's more like just painting this good picture
Of
that we're
course.
inclusive. But we need to do better. It's a work in progress, but we definitely need to do better.
Yes, definitely. And I like the fact that you mentioned the National Disability Council of Namibia. I think because part of their mandate is sort of to hold government institutions, but not only just government institutions, all public institutions, anybody, whether you're a service provider, whether you are a policy-making body, it's part of their mandate to hold them accountable, to see that they are ensuring inclusion, right? And also they sort of monitor whether in Namibia we are actually executing the promises we made when we signed, like, for example, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So some of these things whereby we say freedom of free movement is a human right, So that's their mandate. So why do they not approach media houses, which is now the National Disability Council, and maybe tailor sort of a training, or just engage, basically? Mr. Tove, you are an actor, a model, somebody who is in the public relations space. You are a young man with albinism. And also, as a fellow person with albinism, I'll tell you that the stigmatization that surrounds people with disability in general, let me not just talk about people with albinism, it kind of hinders us to get into spaces of, for example, being a model, where I've seen billboards with you on them, And that is something I was very proud of.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's safe to say that on a mainstream level, you are maybe one of the first, if not the first person that has actually been on a billboard, because our skin color, especially in Namibia, is not associated with advertising codes. And so how do you think, as an individual, how did you get into those spaces? And this also goes to the questions I asked him. What do you think you individually can do from within to sort of normalize people with disabilities within the PR space? To sort of, and I'm sure you still do face stigmatization. Maybe you can also tell us a little bit about that one. But individually, what steps can you take to ensure that we are normalized in that space?
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe it's a thing of, I think a very important thing that we tend to overlook is a basic awareness. Creating awareness and creating platforms where people just share information and share details and share facts. And these are platforms that you don't see every single day, because it's once in a year. We celebrated Disability Day here. We celebrated an event here and there because it's just one day in the year. But these things should be an active pursuit, basically, because people need to get informed. People need to know what not to say, what not to do, what not to. Basically, that's I think awareness is very important. So I learned that from a very early age, because people don't know, they don't really understand how somebody, for example, how somebody comes to have albinism. They don't understand that it's just a biological thing. It has nothing to do with traditions or myths or culture or tribe. It can literally happen to anybody.
Exactly.
Right. So most people don't understand that, just that basic understanding. So they stigmatize this person because he's not like me. And so from a small age, I grew up in that essence, because I grew up in Kangotue. So kids didn't understand basically, why is this kid different? And because it's different, I'm not going to choose him in my football team. You know when you're kids and you're like choosing teams, and then you're picked last because this person doesn't understand. Or like you're like, whatever.
Even though you may probably be the best player on the field.
Exactly, because you don't even get to have that platform where you can actually prove yourself. And that goes to today's world, where even when you go to an audition, or when you're acting or modeling or just going for a job interview, basically, most people would already put you down or be like, no, you're not for this job.
Just by looking
because
at you.
apparently, or this job requires you all to be out in the field, so you're gonna burn. I'm like, such ignorance, because they don't understand that there are measures that can be taken as somebody with albinism or somebody with a disability that allows you to actually, do anything, right? So awareness is very important. I think that's awareness and giving information and having talks like this and podcast and I think media houses. I think this is also a way to just tackle that issue where we said how can we help? How can we hold hands with people with disabilities and move forward? So I think this is a great platform as well, to highlight what is important and how we can better our information.
Yes, of course.
And just sorry to cut you. What you're saying is something that is very important, and that we sometimes as the media are failing dismally. The awareness aspect when it comes to disseminating information only comes into force when there's a specific day that is dedicated to the remembrance of that specific disability. And which is, if you ask me, it's a very pathetic move.
Of course.
So how is it possible that you are only going to create awareness about disability on that day, and it's not something that you are advocating throughout the whole year, for an example? And I think to a certain extent, individuals, we are also failing, because okay, Tove, you were very young, but what did you do to tell people or to educate people? At your age, what are you doing? Or is it just something that you are hearing and then You either turn a blind eye to it and say, really, do I need to address this? And again, it also comes to me now as a person who has access to information, as a person who has access to Tove, who knows what Tove is going through. But we are not putting these things across, and it's not making things easy.
Yeah. So you see, the thing is, you know, high school can be quite brutal, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you're a person with disability, it's even 2 times that, you know. So sometimes one would just be fed up with every time trying to explain to somebody why you are in existence, why you cannot sit too long in the sun, why you look differently from them, you know. Then you're like, just leave this person, obviously. And you know, there's also what you call ignorance. Some people do know, but then they choose not to. Maybe they want to be cool just by calling the other one names. If I'm smarter than you in class, obviously you're going to use my disability against me, you know. And since the other people are not maybe as informed as everybody else, they go with the flow, and then they grow up with some of these mentalities. I think it also starts in the home. I always say, when I'm in the streets and I'm called a name like Nakale, or, you know, some of these names that they use to address us, what I normally say to myself is, and I think we'll we'll be wrapping up now. What I usually tell myself is that, look, especially a 3-year-old, 2-year-old child, what exactly do they know about a person who is different? I can tell you now, like, I'm a father, right? My kid never grew up looking at me different, because he knows this is dead, right? So for him, it's not and that's why I'm saying you can never blame the kids. The parents in the home should ensure that the kids are properly informed. So just before we close up, I want you guys to briefly tell me, from your experiences, what you have seen, the representation of people with disabilities within media. Maybe you can speak from a journalist perspective.
Yeah.
And then and also even in radio or any of the other modes maybe that you have been exposed to of media, the representation of people with disabilities, is it there? Are people in the media accepting? And, you know, when you say media, instantly you think information. So these people are exposed to so much information. So you obviously know that albinism is a biological thing, and it's not a traditional thing like Tove said. Do you think, even though they have that information, are they accepting of people with disability? Do we have enough representation, self-representation of people in media? And then you can also briefly answer, have you seen maybe your fellow models, actors, whether it's with albinism or with any other type of disability, properly represented within the industry? Yeah, shoot. Let's try to keep it brief. I think our time is...
Okay.
This one is... I'm in a very bad position to say this, but no, there is no adequate... equal representation of persons with disability in the media. And that is because of not providing a proper structure or quality when it comes to inviting them in the institution that is presenting or affording an employment, for an example. And I'm looking, with me telling you this, I have a picture of my working environment. If there is a person who is on a wheelchair and you are a reporter or you're a journalist, it will be very difficult to navigate through that. If you are a person who is probably visually impaired, it will be very difficult. Unless you probably worked there for 20 years, then you will know that like at the back of your hand. So I think media houses need to upscale. We need to improve on our inclusivity, because it is very important for you to be inclusive. The sad part about the industry and the education sector when it comes to the accommodation of persons with disability is that it is not inclusive. I did a study at the Namibia University of Science and Technology where I looked at exploring the nature of communication support for students with hearing impairment. And in 2019, there were 5 hearing impaired students in the country, excluding International University of Management. I was shattered. How is it possible that you have schools like Elua Combined School, which is I think in Ongudiva, that has more than 200 hearing impaired students, but the moment they upscale and they move on to the next grade, they become small in number. How is it possible? So what exactly are we doing? It starts with the structures that are in institutions. And why is it only that NAST, for an example, can only allow hearing impaired students to study either education or entrepreneurship? Why? Why is it that, at least now I do know of a hearing impaired learner who did law, if I'm not mistaken, or business management, but it's this fields that are not, it's like last option.
Yeah.
So we need to be more inclusive of that, and that means we need to go back to the drawing board and just change the structures that are guiding our institutions so that we can be more accommodating.
All right, Tove, the same question.
I think I also just agree with Paheja in that. I think we just need to go back to the core, to the foundation of who we are as people, and that's where I also agree with you in terms of family, where you grow up and the foundation. Because when a child is taught from a younger age that no, there are people with disabilities, they are not different from you. You still have to respect them. You still have to appreciate them as your brother or your sister. Just that foundation. As a child grows up, they get into the world and they meet somebody with a disability, and they have respect for them, they have trust for them, they can have relationships with them. And then these are the ways we see how they can be incorporated into the society. People with disabilities are usually alienated and put aside. So we need to bring them into the space. We need to talk about these things and make sure that people are aware. How albinism comes to be, how somebody ends up deaf, how and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, as with regards to the other statement where you said how I think, like me being an actor and a model as well, I've tried to just show that you can be whatever you want to be. Whether you are disabled or not, and then eventually people come on board, and because I also know of a model who has a hearing disability who also took part in Viduk Fashion Week.
Okay.
So these are little things. Yes, I'm not gonna be like take the responsibility and say no, they joined because of me, but many a times you just see somebody else who's different and you're like, oh, okay, if they can do it, then why can't I?
Exactly.
And I think we need to have more of these people, more of people with disability who just come out and speak about these topics, and also just live their lives to the fullest, to the point where the next person sees that, no, man, I mean, these people can do anything.
Yep.
They set their mind to. So I'm going to employ them, or I'm going to give them this loan to go study, or just whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So basically, the general feel is that the societal systems, right, need to be adjusted in a manner that we understand that there's people with different needs. Whether if it's your office, even if for today you do not have a person with a visual impairment, for example, you have to think ahead and say, what if one day somebody applies for that job?
Exactly.
So you have to keep an open mind to things like that. And then we said the importance is family, starting the whole process from a younger age. Because once we grow up knowing a certain thing, it has happened with many other things, religion, traditional beliefs. Once we grow up knowing a certain thing, something was instilled in us. I think when we grow up, then that's what it is, and then for us it's normal. I would like to, obviously we could extend on this conversation longer, but we were given a certain time. I just want to take this time to appreciate you gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for expanding on this conversation with me. Obviously, we are going to have an opportunity to get other platforms where we can speak more on this situation. Yeah. I think it's a
Thank you
wrap.
very much for having me on board.
This has been the Action for Access podcast. For more information on the Action for Access project, check out Namibia Media Trust, Action Coalition Namibia, and the National Federation of People with Disabilities in Namibia across all social media platforms. Once again, this has been your host, Orben Muluti.